Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today we're doing another Chaos Kitbashing video, but it's somehow not marine related. Some of my very favorite models in 40k history are the Chaos Cultists that debuted in 7th edition's Dark Vengeance box. They're full of character, extremely modifiable, even though they are push fits. Their modern counterparts leave a lot to be desired in my opinion. But it ain't just me, almost every single 40k video game uses the old sculpts. Hey, that's the point of this video. Most 40k games like Dawn of War, Space Marine 2, Bolt Gun, and Darktide to name a few have really done the Chaos Cultists a lot better service than even the models themselves. So today I'm going to be building some Chaos Cultists and some Chaos OGRYNS. Something you could probably utilize in older games of 40k or Kill Team. Though in my case, I'm building for Necromunda. But before we get into all that good stuff, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. You don't have to, but it would mean a lot to me, and you get some cool benefits. But my saucy little crawdad, I have just one question for you. Are you the type of character to paint an absolute masterpiece of a miniature in front of my very eyes, then boldly toss it into a Tupperware bin right before our game? I know what you are. Well, get your shit together because this video is sponsored by Tabletop Stronghold. Tabletop Stronghold provides one of the best carrying cases that you can get on the market, this being the Mag case. This little baby is absolutely spectacular. Not only does this double as a carrying case, you can also use it as a display case or just simply storing your minis safely, utilizing space-age technology of
Magnets! Oh!
Combined with plenty of room for any miniatures of any size, you can rest assured that your life's work shall remain pristine and untouched. And don't you worry not about magnets, this baby comes packed with plenty of magnets for your army. And it's durable as hell unless one of your gargantuan nerd friends sits on it. And hey, if that doesn't sound like an amazing deal, I don't know what does. Oh wait, I do. The Halloween sale is up and you can get up to 35% off your purchase. It's pretty sweet. Thank you to Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video. But hey, enough of the promotional stuff, let's get to the actual kit bashing. Now to begin the process of actually building our cultists, we are going to be utilizing one kit in particular. This being the COD or Redemptionist kit. Compared side by side with the original Chaos Cultists from Dawn of War, these guys are practically one-to-one. But there's a little bit of extra tuning we can do to really make these guys stand out and feel all the more chaosy. The first figure I'm going very simple just because I like pacing these kit bashing videos with simple kit bashes to more advanced. The auto pistols are already a great choice, and with this figure basically being pre-built for us, I decided to simply clip down the arm and give him a striking pose. Already this is pretty much exactly what we want, but I want to take things a little further of course. I'm not that lazy. Okay, I'm pretty lazy, but you know, whatever. For this, I decided to give him a big-ass skull. One, because I thought it would be funny to paint this as a skull mask, but I also think it'd be really funny to just have a bleeding skull for a face. Already, we're kinda cooking with this design. However, I want to take it further with the next figure by simply adding in different Cawdor bits from the base kit. If you remember early in the channel's history, I got kind of obsessed with this kit, so a lot of my bits are actually exhausted. But I still have plenty knocking around. This autogun is a great start. However, it is a little difficult to glue onto the main bodies of the Redemptionists, as they aren't really meant to have these arms, so a little sprue goo would do the trick. I found that the Necromunda kits are really an untouched cornucopia of bits, and it really goes to show that there's really a lot of love put into this game. If you want to make more custom human figures, this system has probably enough bits for you to make whatever you want. As for the faces, I ended up just slicing down the actual faces of the Redemptionists. I didn't have any left from the base kit, so carving away at the over-the-top headdresses was a must. You'll also notice that there's some bits missing from the auto rifle. I didn't want this to be bald, I wanted it to be spiky, so I fished around for some Death Guard bits, mainly Poxwalker spikes, and just a straight-up Death Guard helmet pike. But at this point, you're probably realizing I'm not really doing a ton of kit bashing. I'm more or less just shifting around parts because, well, the Redemptionists are kinda perfect. But that's where we're gonna change up gears. For the last figure of the trio of the main little cultists, I decided to implement a kit that I haven't really touched since I got it. This being the Beastmen kit. more specifically the Felgor Ravagers kill team. This figure was technically the first one I kitbashed, and if you can't tell, I did this off camera at first. I ended up essentially just removing some of the Beastmen arms, slice away at the hairs, and I would fit this guy with one of the Beastmen whips. At first it looks a little silly because he straight up has a Titanic anchor arm, but at the same time, his free hand will be gloved, so you can kinda get away with it. It is just a tight fit. Speaking of tight fits... oh, doesn't sound right. Anyway, speaking of tight fits, I didn't exactly fit the right arm into the right body, so I straight up had to use my Dremel to essentially melt away at the underarm of this figure. I kinda got carried away and it ended up actually melting away a little bit of the outside plastic, and all in all, it proved to be worth it. Granted, a little bit more diligence probably would have been the way to go, but it's better than nothing. So after gluing it in place, I ended up having to use quite a bit of sprue goo to kind of fit this over, mostly to conform it to the body itself. At the same time, however, these are cultists. A little rip in the robe is not something that's out of the question, so I don't feel too bad about adding in this detail, or I guess removing this detail. However, as one final little bit to add onto the figure, besides one of the regular Redemptionist faces, I would steal yet another little trinket from the Felgor Ravagers, this being a Chaos-starred holster. At first it seemed a little gargantuan, but when you look at the auto pistol in his hand, it's essentially an SMG. Plus, I'm always a fan of painting leather. Speaking of painting, once all these bits are attached, I decided to paint these guys up similarly to my Blooded kill team that I painted last year. This being my sort of knockoff Mobian 6th. Normally I try to paint things to almost the best of my ability for the channel, but since that team was essentially my first speed painting video, I decided to kind of speed paint the Cultists. And with that, the Cultists are finished, and I'm quite happy with how they turned out. The thing is I almost feel a little lazy with this episode, but these models are such a perfect fit for Chaos that I feel like I don't really need to do all that much. And yes, the irony is not lost on me. Building Imperial Cultists into Chaos Cultists, and it's kind of funny. However, we do have other models to get to, and truthfully, I think the OGRYNS really steal the show in this episode. Well, like I said, the OGRYNS completely steal the show in this episode, I won't lie. To start out, I'm simply just using the basic Imperial OGRYNS kit. And to start this first one out, I'm utilizing some Iron Guts bits from my Ogre's army from Age of Sigmar. Another video that I'm planning on doing later on. These bits are incredibly fitting for OGRYNS, and I'm kinda surprised I don't see conversions for these guys all too often. I know OGRYNS aren't the most popular unit in 40k, not by any stretch of the imagination, but Darktide kinda brought these guys to the forefront for a lot of people. I also like that the weird Darktide board game just has a basic OGRYN rather than any special model. Alright, I'll cut the rambling. Now for actually building more of the units, I decided to slice down the armor plating, mostly just getting rid of the treads. I do feel a little bad removing this, because it just looks really cool, but since I'm primarily building this guy for Necromunda, I wanted to limit the amount of true Imperial bits as I could. I'd also have to end up slicing down the Imperialis symbol on the side, and I would sand down the front of it to attach other bits. I also ended up drilling in some extra bullet holes, but I ended up actually gluing over this, so I guess it doesn't matter, but we'll come back to that later on. As for the new gut plate, I decided to take the War Drum of sorts from the Felgor Ravagers kit yet again, and I would slice the hand away as well as the connecting ropes. After doing so and cleaning off the little bit, I would then glue it onto the breastplate. Rather than fiddling with Tamiya, I just straight up used some super glue for this, just to make sure it fit nice and snug. After doing so, I would fit both pieces of the chorus together, and I accidentally bonked off the little bit from the front, but I quickly refitted it. And with that, it already looks really cool. It already kinda looks like an Iron Gut, so I felt it'd be cool to just essentially make a Chaos Ogre from Warhammer Fantasy into an OGRYN. It's already a cool look, and I would love to have some Chaos Ogre bits, and I decided to fit his left hand with the spiked knuckle gauntlet. Yet again another bit from the Ogre Gluttons. I'd then attach one of the Ripaguns from the basic kit, and don't worry, we'll do plenty of conversion to make this look a little bit more chaosy later on. However, I would keep the theme going as I took one of the Empire shields from the Iron Guts kit, although that might likely be a green skin shield. Side note, I know I don't cover Warhammer Fantasy all too often, but I think it's really funny a lot of AOS kits still have Warhammer Fantasy bits in them. Please don't do a range refresh for the Ogre Maw tribes, just add more models. Also, I would add on yet another bit from the Ogre Maw tribes kit, this being these dangly hooks. I don't know, felt fitting. Now to make him all the more chaosy, I decided to take my electric Dremel, and I would drill various holes into the back of the armor. I would then fit in some arrowhead bits from the Sons of Behemoth kit. We are using a lot of Warhammer Fantasy bits for this episode. This is the part in the video where I asked slyly, should I do some Warhammer the Old World stuff? Let me know in the comments. But to more directly talk about what I'm actually doing in the video, I decided to use these arrowheads to imitate chaos spikes. Though I kinda would prefer the arrowheads to be a little bit bigger, I still like how this looks. Considering I'm adding both of these OGRYNS to be more in line with my Blooded Kill team, I kinda wanted them to be sort of underbosses to the main Chaos OGRYN in that kit. With that final detail, the first figure is essentially complete, but we still need to fix up the Rip-A-Gun. The first thing I would end up doing is replacing the main bayonet at the end of the gun with a rusty old halberd bit from the Ghouls kits. I wanted to go with something a little bit more decrepit, and it feels a little bit more fitting if this guy was more nurgly, but overall I kinda want to go for a Chaos Undivided look, so it's not too unfitting. As another detail I wanted to add to the Rip-A-Gun, I decided to add this skull and chain from the original Chaos Space Marines kit. I have a ton of these bits lying around, so I thought it would be fitting. Thankfully, there's a nice little crevice for it to glue onto, and it feels pretty fitting. Plus, I thought it would be fun to add just a little bit of kinetic feeling to the actual model. With that last detail, the first figure is complete, and now we can get working on the second figure. First thing I ended up doing was deciding on whether or not I wanted to add armor to this guy, and I really did debate it. However, overall, it's not going to be very easy to kitbash a Chaos figure without armor. But to kind of mix things up, I decided to go for Nork Deadog's armor within the kit itself. And the first thing I ended up having to really do is, yet again, slice off the Imperialis symbols. Thankfully, these bits are rather simple to slice off, and all it really takes is a good sharp X-Acto knife. Plus, if I damage the trim, it's not the end of the world. I can always just add in more bullet holes with the knife itself, which I ended up doing, but I didn't really sweat being super neat. We'd also yet again use the Dremel to drill in more holes for the armor. I'll do the Chaos arrows later on, however I ended up doing one on the chest plate for a Chaos horn. Apparently I didn't film that part yet. As for our second OGRYNS noggin, I simply just used one from the base kit. There is a little bit of a deformity to it, so it feels befitting of a Chaos figure. There are plenty more ogre heads I probably could have used that would have been fitting too, but I kinda like the idea of painting a Deadeye on this figure. As for his main armament on the right hand, I decided to take one of the grenade launchers and modify it heavily. However, the first thing I really had to do was glue the two bits together. Well, I say had to, but it probably would have been easier to do with what I did by just simply having it in two different pieces. But that's besides the point. The first thing I ended up doing was completely slicing the main barrel as well as the hydraulic bit, and I would actually carve out most of the bottom part of the weapon. I also made sure to have a very flat surface where the barrel was, and this process got messy very quickly. I ended up having to carve a lot of this bit out. Now to begin the official modification, I ended up taking one of the flamer chainsaws from the Redemptionist kit, and I would simply slice free one of the chainsaws. I would then attach it to the gauntlet, and off camera I ended up attaching one of the heavy stubbers from the Orlok gang kit, effectively making an uber killy gauntlet. Something super custom made and perfectly fitting for Necromunda. However, there is a lot of bald spots on this bit, so I ended up just sweeping the rug over it. This being a lot of layers of green stuff to look more like a cheap cloth, and to somewhat give the impression that he's not just holding onto a weapon, this is grafted onto his arm. It's pretty befitting, though it did sag a little bit in the end, so it does look a little gloppy, but adding in little tears in the fiber did add quite a bit of good texture to him. Overall, I like how this looks. Even though it does look a little silly, I'm not a master of green stuff by any stretch of the imagination. As for his left arm, I ended up using one of Nork's other arms for the knife hand. However, I would glue on one of the club hands from the Glutton's kit. As you'll probably notice, I ended up slicing off the actual club, and to fit in place a power maul, I ended up having to slice down one from the base kit of the OGRYNS. I ended up having to carve this down quite a bit too. There was a couple wires in the way that just wouldn't work with this figure, so I had to really slice it down to the bare hand. However, this is not going to be an easy glue, so the first thing I really had to do after modifying this was to drill into the base of the fist as well as the bottom side of the shock club. I would then take another one of those little arrows from the Sons of Behemoth kit, and I would use it as a pin between both bits. I could have used a paperclip, but I couldn't find them and I had a ton of these on my desk. Hey, if it works, it works. After gluing it in place, I would give the OGRYN a pauldron in the form of one of the Felgor Ravager's gut plates. This fit rather comfortably onto the deltoid of the figure, and all I really needed to do was slice down the peg in the middle and just simply add superglue. I really like how the cloth is flowing, and I like having extra bits to paint metallic areas for this kill team. Plus, the simplicity of the somewhat chaosy look is just perfect for this model. Now to add in one final detail, I ended up using the Commissar skull from the Nork kit, but of course with this bit, I ended up having to do what I did with almost every other Imperial bit in this kit. Slice off the Imperialis symbol, though I guess in this case, the Aquila. This was not nearly as easy as the rest of the armor, as it's a curved surface and I really didn't want to damage this Commissar hat. Also, side note, I'm missing Commissars had gargantuan hats like this. This is why I love heroic scale. True scale Commissars have weak beta hats. But once I sanded things down to my liking, I would simply attach it to the same spot, and I'm quite happy with how it looks. That's another complaint I do have about the blooded kill team. It always annoys me that the Commissar doesn't have a hat. Maybe I should have added this onto him, but it is what it is. After this bit was complete, my OGRYNS were ready for the painting, and like I said before, I'm painting them up to fit my blooded kill team. It's a pretty simple process, and I'm primarily speed painting these guys. However, the OGRYNS did get a little bit more love, as it's a bit more obvious when you speed paint these guys. But once they were fully painted up, I was left with two amazing Chaos OGRYNS, and I still have one left over. I'm really happy with how all of these figures turned out in the end, but I especially love the OGRYNS. In the end, I'm not entirely interested in playing kill teams, so having a bunch of these guys for Necromunda will be incredibly fun. And if you're wondering about that third OGRYN, well, I do have plans for a full-blown Necromunda kitbash video sometime, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. I do love me some Chaos Marines, but this is a fun detour. Plus, I liked leaving little breadcrumbs for what you can expect for an actual video involving my ogres, but that'll have to wait for another day. For now, if you enjoyed what you saw, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.